My parents cut my hair while I slept, so I would look less attractive at my sister's graduation. That was their choice, and this is what followed. I woke in the middle of the night with a cold sensation sliding down my neck. There was an odd lightness at the back of my head, as if something had quietly been removed. The room was dark, yet I noticed a faint metallic smell, sharp and familiar. I lifted my hand, trembling, and touched my neck. That was when I saw it. Long, dark chestnut strands scattered across my pillow, like pieces of something taken without permission. I got out of bed, my heart beating unevenly, and walked toward the mirror, my steps heavy despite the soft carpet. The reflection was unmistakable. The hair that had once reached my back, hair I had grown and cared for over nearly 10 years, was now unevenly chopped. The cuts were rough, careless, and clearly intentional. This was not a short hairstyle. It was a message. I searched the room for any explanation, thinking briefly of an intruder, until my eyes landed on the crafting scissors on my desk, the same pair my mother used for household tasks. Next to them was a sticky note. The handwriting was messy but familiar. Don't worry. Short hair makes you less noticeable. Today is Emma's day. Don't be selfish, Mom. I didn't cry or shout. I stood there in silence, as if all sound had been drained from the room, until my legs gave out, and I sank to the floor, holding the cut strands as though they were the last pieces of dignity taken from me without warning. In that moment, I understood that sometimes the people called family are the ones who want you to disappear so someone else can shine. If they believed this would silence me, they were mistaken. This would not be a story about being hidden. It would be the beginning of something they never expected. My name is Lana. I'm 23 years old, and I learned early that fairness does not always exist inside a family. There were 4 of us, but attention was reserved for 3, my parents and my younger sister, Emma. She was the golden child. From an early age, she had confidence, charm, and a presence that filled every room. When guests visited, my mother proudly presented Emma, listing her ballet lessons and language skills. I was usually in the background, washing dishes or staying quiet. If anyone asked about me, my mother would simply say I was a good girl who never caused problems. I didn't cause problems, but I wasn't noticed either. I learned to step aside, to stay agreeable, to fade when needed. Emma had piano lessons starting at 5. I taught myself guitar from old library books. Emma wore new dresses. I wore hand-me-downs. I told myself that being patient and obedient would earn love, but my efforts were routinely dismissed. I earned straight A's for 12 years, yet my mother suggested I try something less dull, like a beauty pageant. When I won a full year scholarship, my father told me to stay quiet because Emma was upset over a breakup. I watched as the family rallied around her for small disappointments, while I studied silently through my own challenges. When Emma modeled for a magazine, her photo was enlarged and displayed proudly in our living room. When my hair grew past my shoulders, my mother told me it hid my face and wasn't worth showing. I didn't seek attention or admiration, but like anyone else, I wanted to feel beautiful at least once in someone else's eyes. Emma's graduation felt like my opportunity, not to compete, but to finally exist as myself. I had saved money to buy a navy silk dress and prepared carefully, believing this would be the first time I stepped into a crowd without shrinking. I imagined arriving confidently, speaking at the ceremony as a student mentor, and letting my presence quietly speak for itself. I hoped that if I did everything right, my parents might feel proud. Instead, they saw me as a risk, as if my appearance alone could take something from Emma. That night, holding my cut hair, I realized a difficult truth. Not everyone who gives you life wants to see you grow. Some want you to stay small, so another child can shine without comparison. I had accepted that reality for years, until it was made undeniable. From that point on, I knew that protecting my worth meant standing on my own, no longer waiting for approval or staying silent. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself, but in how it was justified as care. And that was the moment everything changed. I went downstairs. My mother was sitting calmly at the dining table, slowly stirring her coffee. She looked at me over the rim of the cup with no shock, no regret, only a quiet stillness, as if I had merely spoken out of turn while Emma was sleeping. "It's just hair," she said, casually, like she had chipped a nail. "You should focus on supporting your sister. Don't cause a scene." I struggled to process her words. My father sat at the other end of the table in his pajamas, reading the morning paper. He did not look up. He said only one thing, flat and distant. "Don't mess this up. Emma needs a perfect day. No distractions." And I understood exactly what he meant. I was the distraction. I stood there with uneven hair and a hollow feeling in my chest that was not anger, but something heavier, emptiness. It was the moment I realized I was not only betrayed, but considered inconvenient, an unwanted presence that needed to be erased. I did not cry. I turned away, quietly took my phone from my hoodie pocket, and turned on the voice recorder. From that point on, I recorded everything. Every sentence, every dismissive comment, every look that once made me question myself. Now I knew it was not sensitivity or imagination. They truly wanted me removed from the family image simply because I might look better on Emma's day. I returned to my room, locked the door, sat on the floor, and replayed older recordings I had saved for therapy. Statements like, "Lana should know her place," or "Don't let her post photos with Emma, it cheapens the image," or "With hair that long, Emma fades." Individually, they sounded careless. Together, they revealed a pattern of favoritism, exclusion, and emotional control disguised as concern. Sitting there in the pale morning light, hair scattered around me, I understood this was no longer about a haircut. It was about my life and my value, something I would now have to defend myself. If they thought I would quietly attend the graduation, smiling with my head lowered, they were wrong. I would not arrive as a shadow. I would arrive with clarity, exposing the false image they had carefully maintained for years. I called Na just before 6 in the morning, my voice unsteady. She answered after 2 rings. In 4 years of college, she was the only person who had seen me as myself, not as Emma's sister, not as a role, but as a person with equal worth. I said, "I need you." That was enough. She replied, "Send me your location." 15 minutes later, she arrived. I had not even washed my face. My hair hung unevenly, making the damage impossible to ignore. She stopped at the doorway, closed the door behind her, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "They did this?" I nodded. I handed her my mother's note, then played the recordings, last night's and others collected over the years. One clip captured my father saying, "She thinks a nice dress will make her outshine Emma. Wake her up." My mother replied coldly, "Cut it. That hair makes her think she has value." Na stayed silent for a long moment, then looked directly at me. "We're not staying quiet. Not this time." We sat on the bedroom floor and planned carefully, not with rage or chaos, but with facts and restraint. The first step was fixing my hair. Na took me to a small salon where an elderly stylist gently examined the uneven strands and said, "You didn't lose your hair. You're starting something new." Within an hour, my hair was shaped into a clean, sharp bob that framed my face without hiding it. For the first time in a day, I laughed. Then we turned to the speech. I had been invited to speak as lead mentor for a scholarship program for underprivileged women. Originally, it was meant to be brief and polite. Now I rewrote it. No empty praise, no vague talk of unity, just the truth. We selected short, clear recordings with names and context and edited them into a 45-second video. That was enough. We chose a simple white suit, minimal accessories, and neutral heels. Na said, "You don't need to shine. You just need to show up." By evening, the plan was complete. We backed up the recordings, sent copies to a lawyer, and secured everything. I wasn't seeking apology or approval. I wanted the truth acknowledged. For once, I wanted my existence to be undeniable. The graduation was held in the city's central hall, bright and elegant, filled with music, cameras, and shimmering gowns. When I entered, no one noticed me at first. Just a woman in a white suit with calm posture. As I walked down the aisle, heads slowly turned. I passed my family. My mother stiffened. My father looked away. Emma smirked, confident and unaware. She thought I was there to support her. She was wrong. When my name was called as lead mentor, I stepped onto the stage under the lights. I began with the approved opening, speaking of effort and achievement. Polite applause followed. Then I paused, stepped forward, and said calmly, "Before I continue, I need to share something personal." I explained that my hair had been cut while I slept, not by a stranger, but by my mother. The room went silent. I described the tea, the night, and waking to loss, not just of hair, but of trust. Then I played the recording. My mother's voice filled the hall, clear and unmistakable. Murmurs spread through the audience. And in that moment, there was no denying what had happened, or that I was finally being seen. A man in the audience pulled out his phone to record. A professor in the front row covered her mouth, eyes wide. I continued, "All my life, I was taught to stay in line. When your little sister cries, you disappear so you don't steal the spotlight. When you are a little too pretty, a little too capable, it's considered selfish." I looked toward the family seats. Emma sat frozen, no smile, hands gripping her dress. My mother bowed her head. My father muttered something under his breath, but I didn't need to hear it. Some families don't need to strike to hurt you. They just act as if you were never meant to exist. The moment you stand tall, believe you deserve to be seen, they find a way to cut you out. I inhaled deeply and concluded, you can't cut a girl away from her own worth. And sometimes it is that betrayal that makes her shine. Silence filled the room, dense, heavy, undeniable. I stepped off the stage quietly, knowing this silence was the loudest statement I had ever made. A middle-aged professor rushed over, taking my hand. "You just did what hundreds of students only wish they could. Thank you." Another student held out his phone. The clip of my speech was already spreading. I glanced at my parents. They were standing, awkward, searching for an exit. I didn't call to them. No apologies were needed. I only wanted them to know that this time, they were being exposed. The girl whose hair had been cut in the dark was now shining under the lights they had once tried to keep her away from. Emma panicked, eyes wide, lips tight. Then, without warning, she stood. Her chair screeched sharply, drawing attention, and she rushed down the aisle, heels clacking, her gown sweeping the floor. The grand doors slammed behind her. I got home after nightfall. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, missed calls, notifications flooding in. I hadn't opened any yet, but I already knew the world had seen. Nah, sent the first link. The video, filmed from the third row, wasn't perfect visually, but the audio was crystal clear. My words, my mother's voice, and the silence that followed had gone viral on TikTok. They cut her hair so she wouldn't outshine her sister. She cut their silence instead. Within 6 hours, it surpassed 1 million views. A Twitter user reposted it, "You can't cut power, graduation sabotage, family abuse is real, let her shine." The next day, the school paper ran a front-page feature. When scissors tried to silence her, Lana Whitmore's speech left a hall in silence. A local news station reached out for a live interview. A student magazine published an editorial. Silence is no longer an option. Then came an email from the scholarship organization I had been a mentee of in my freshman year, Silent Daughters Rise. They invited me to be the face of a nationwide campaign for girls overshadowed in their own families, offering a full graduate scholarship and a speaking tour across universities. My hands trembled, not from fear, but because, for the first time, my voice wasn't being suppressed. Emma didn't stay silent either. 3 days later, a Reddit forum uncovered an alternate account, tied to her email, posting vicious comments defending her. Hashtags like Emma Exposed began trending. Brands that had partnered with her quietly removed her endorsements. A cosmetics company released a statement condemning emotional abuse and bullying. Her boyfriend posted a single story, "I didn't know she hated her sister this much." A week later, he unfollowed her publicly. My parents tried to stay quiet, but word got out. The school board confirmed they were under investigation for causing emotional harm to a student, particularly in an academic environment where I served as a mentor. Reports circulated of my mother crying after a disciplinary meeting and my father arguing with a professor. I didn't need to verify. I knew they were experiencing what I had once felt, being seen through an uncompromising lens. I felt no triumph, only peace. My video reached 10 million views. 5 days later, I received a message from a girl in Ohio. "Lena, you gave me the courage to leave home. My mother always said not to outshine my sister. I used to think it was my fault. Now I know I'm not crazy. I was just never allowed to shine. Thank you." I didn't cry. I closed my phone and looked out the window. Sunset light filled our small room, casting golden hues across my face. My hair was short, but my eyes had never been this sharp. Someone once said, "Hair can grow back, but trust, once cut, never fully reconnects." I no longer relied on family validation, but I relied fully on myself. I had learned this. Sometimes you aren't cut out of a story. You are meant to rewrite it in your own voice, unapologetically. 3 months have passed since I stepped off that stage in a white suit beneath hundreds of stunned eyes. What began as a phone-recorded clip became a wave of awakening in the community. Invitations poured in, a formal apology from the university, an invitation to speak on a national television program on education and family dynamics. I had finally been seen, not as a shadow, but as myself. One invitation stood out, one I couldn't refuse. A national conference on educational equity and injustice in the home, themed The Forgotten Children, When Family Dims Your Light. I stood on a large stage facing hundreds of educators, psychologists, parents, and students. The lights didn't intimidate me. The microphone didn't make my hands tremble. I told my story, not to accuse, but to illuminate, to shed light on what thousands of other girls have been forced to hide. I spoke calmly, without theatrics or tears, but each word resonated with those who had ever thought, it's just a family matter. Afterward, a woman approached me. She introduced herself as the creative lead for an international education brand launching a global campaign called No More Side Characters, honoring those pushed out of the spotlight because they didn't fit the role someone else had scripted. She offered me the position of campaign ambassador and lead content strategist. "We don't need a celebrity," she said. "We need someone who's lived in silence and knows how to use truth to wake an entire room." I accepted. A few weeks later, I moved to a small coastal city where the ocean breeze made it feel like everything could begin again. The first round of funding went to opening a mentoring center for young women who had experienced emotional abuse or control within their families. Nina moved in with me, taking on the roles of creative advisor and community engagement lead. We were no longer just two students sharing a dorm. We were building a space of light together, where no one needed permission to be seen. The center was modest, 3 stories, wide windows overlooking a park, walls painted warm ivory. Above the entrance, a small, elegant sign hung, and on the oak front door, a brass inscription read, "Your worth is not in the length of your hair, but in how fully you have lived your truth." On opening day, we invited everyone who had reached out over the past 3 months. A girl from Texas, forced to drop out so her brother could afford tuition. A young woman from Arizona called invisible by her mother for not looking like her sister. They came with old wounds and left with brighter eyes. I no longer sought revenge or waited for those who hurt me to fall. I had learned that true strength is standing in the room that once silenced you, speaking with your own words intact. I no longer had long hair cascading down my back, but I had eyes that looked forward, feet that didn't tremble, and a life lived without permission. That light they could never cut. The grand opening was a bright Saturday morning. Sunlight poured through sheer curtains, filling the room. Community members, young women who had reached out after the viral clip, and a few former professors attended. Na stood at the reception table, guest list in hand, her eyes shining with conviction. I was behind the golden-lettered acrylic sign when the automatic glass doors opened. My family entered. My mother in cream, sunglasses masking her eyes, moved slowly. My father followed silently, shoulders slightly hunched. Emma trailed behind, her dress wrinkled, heels unsteady. The room held its breath. I didn't move, just watched them like a painting I once knew, now distant. My mother approached, removed her glasses, her eyes red, voice steady yet hollow. "We're proud of you, Lana," she said. I smiled softly. "I'm proud too," I replied, not to wound, but to mark the end. My father spoke next, low but firm. Family can always forgive one another. I walked to the reception desk, where a small wooden box sat. I placed my hand on it and said, "If you want to apologize, write it clearly on a feedback card. Here, feelings aren't swept aside like hair on the floor." Silence fell. Emma turned away. My parents said nothing. They left quietly, and this time I was ahead, leading something greater than the wounds they left. After the opening, I returned to the office. The room was quiet, lit by soft lamps, the wind rustling outside. I poured a cup of tea, sat in my chair, facing a painting I'd hung on day 1. A woman in a field, hair flying, posture upright, backlit by golden light. I reflected on everything, from the night my hair was cut, to my graduation stage, to my parents at the mentoring center. I had once believed long hair was what made me beautiful, that perfection in body and voice would earn love. But it was standing bare, trust stripped away, that I began to shine. This message is for you watching now. Maybe you sit quietly where no one listens. Maybe you live in a family where you are the background. If you have been silenced by those who were meant to love you, remember, they can cut your hair, your dreams, even your confidence, but never your voice unless you allow it. Speak up. Stand in your own way. Sometimes one voice is enough to help thousands see themselves. If you've been treated like a shadow, left behind for not fitting a role, share your story in the comments. Write it down. Reclaim your power. Another cycle of silence will be broken. You don't need to rebel to be seen. Just show up as yourself. No apologies. No permission. You are always worthy of love, even if no one saw it. Let your light begin with your own words. And remember, seas may be dull, but some girls sharpen.